Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soul Talks with Alka. So, the caliber of the person that I have today made me wear my glasses because I had to look a little bit more collegiate for my guest who's here. I have to kind of come up to her standard. Today, I have with me Dalia Fahmy. She is a mom of two, an associate professor at Long Island University in political science. She is a political activist for Islam, does interviews, does panels, is runs marathons. I mean, this woman is a powerhouse. She just goes on and on and on, and she makes you realize that a lot can be accomplished in a day if you put your mind to it. She's a doting daughter and she's a doting daughter-in-law. So there's a lot that goes on in that little package that you see here. Dalia, welcome to Soul Talks with Alka.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. But honestly, Alka, since I moved to Central New Jersey, you are the inspiration.
Oh,
Since I met you 22 years ago, it's really, you've established the model of someone who's successful, but also puts community and giving back first. So thank you.
oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. That's so sweet. We have a mutual admiration society, supposedly. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. So Dalia, tell me, how do you do it all? First, tell me, where does your inspiration come from? But how do you manage everything? Because that's something that every woman struggles with, is how to manage everything without guilt.
So that's a tough one because of course looks can be deceiving. Nothing is easy, but I'll tell you, I think it comes from the kind of family that I'm from. My parents immigrated to the United States in the 1960s from Egypt. And this is a very different time. I know people are more recent immigrants, but they came in the 1960s during the Great Brain Drain, which was when immigration policy changed for professional scientists primarily and physicians to come to the United States to help build the science infrastructure. And so my parents came at that time period and were, very quickly entered the professional class, and within, 12 years had us. And it was, they worked, I mean, my father will tell you, even though they both came from well-to-do families, he came to the United States with $100 and a pillowcase that smelled like home. And no matter what he had, his degrees, he knew he had to come here and start over, and that he was going to be investing not just in himself, but his future children and the future of his entire family.
Absolutely.
And so it was that kind of work ethic that my parents came to the United States with that, lend itself to all of us. And I have many siblings, that the expectation that you are going to study hard in school, become successful at what you do, but that community service is going to be at the core of what you are, is what my parents established for us. So as young children, not only did we have to go to school and do well, we were part of every aspect of community giving back. Whether it was soup kitchens, helping out at the mosque, being part of, the library community in North Jersey, where I'm from. That kind of ethic of you don't just take, but giving back is as equally important as building yourself and your success, is what my parents modeled for us. And so it's the complete expectation, right? So that you're going to, I think like every child of immigrants, I say every brown kid, we all start in the health sciences, right? I was going to become a neurosurgeon, and I remember second year of college, I was at NYU taking this international relations course with famous Professor Michael Gilligan, and then coming home and telling my parents, I think I want to be a political scientist.
Oh my God.
Exactly. Every brown parent's worst nightmare, that their kid's not going to be a physician, right? And my parents were like, well, that's fine, insofar as you take it to the final degree, right? It's not a cop out, right?
Right.
And so it was, you're going to finish your bachelor's, and then you're going to do a master's, and then you're going to do a PhD. And it wasn't, there was a complete expectation that you're going to take it to the final level, no matter what it is that you're going to do. And in the process, you have to give back to the community.
That's awesome.
And whether it's, mentoring young women, giving lectures, so I'm in international relations and foreign policy. There are very few women of color in this field.
Yes.
And so, the idea that I must mentor other young women along the road is something that, of course, my parents expect. That success is nothing if it's just for you. Success is for all of us, and I
Absolutely.
think it comes from you know actually the way they see the United States. It's for in many ways it was the American dream, right?
Yes.
They came here, were successful, and have all these successful children. And so even though being civically minded is core in our religion,
Yeah.
being civically engaged, it's something that they put at the forefront of what it's going to mean to be an Egyptian American, that you're
That's
going
awesome.
to give back. And so I think the fact that that was the background I came from, and that was the kind of expectation, no matter what, it wasn't just about go to school, like, what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do?
Right.
So it really comes from my parents, and now my father is about to turn 80, my mother's in her late 70s, and even though they retired a very long time ago, their social activities of giving back. My father runs several youth circles. My mother started, towards the end of her career, a house for women victims of domestic violence.
Wow.
And over time, it's turned into advocates for refugees, women who don't know their rights, women who might not know any language, don't know English, and don't know, for example, that they have rights in the United States.
Wow.
And
They're living their values clearly.
so the fact that they are older in life and still every day, even during the pandemic, worried about the community, and the community is not limited to Muslims or to Arabs. It's really the community they live in, and so they give back to the neighborhood that helped raise their kids.
That's
And so
awesome.
seeing them as role models, it's like
You
they
don't have a choice.
not only do you have a choice, but if your parent, my father always says, if I did X, I expect all of you to do X plus Y.
Yeah.
And so they set the bar way too high.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. But I have a question. So you were here a long time, but you wear a hijab, right? So that was not, I have a lot of Muslim friends. Some wear a hijab, some don't. When you were growing up, how is that seen when it wasn't so accepted, when it wasn't so visual, when it wasn't like mainstream? Where,
Absolutely. I grew up in a time where I very rarely saw visibly Muslim women, and my mother was not until I was older, right? It was they grew up, although they were religious, kind of very secular from where they came from. I guess from some elite class overseas, where looking like this was not really what the elites did.
yes, yes.
And so in many ways, they actually found their religion here in the United States, or
Yeah.
understood it here in the United States. And I remember, I have an older sister, and I remember when she started covering, and like, I was wearing shorts and bathing suits and tank tops, and and I was like, oh, I could never do that. But then I just like, wow, look at how people treat her. There's like such a level of respect. And although I admired and always wanted to be like my older sister, admired, I was like, I don't know if I could do that. And I remember, making a decision. I think I want to be visibly Muslim. And, I'll tell you a small story. I was having a conversation with a teacher, and him telling me that, well, the reason why you sound, and I wasn't covered. And he's like, the reason why you sound like this and you are like this is because you're an enlightened Muslim.
Oh.
And like you've left the trappings that hold your brain back. And I'm like, no, those women that cover are also enlightened and smart, and I realized that the perception of me being smart and enlightened was like read as in spite of my religion.
Mm.
No, actually my religion inspires this.
Yes.
And so I remember deciding that I wanted to cover, and that same person telling me, so there's a politics to your piety? I said, you know what, maybe I'll take it.
Yeah.
But yes,
But I'm sure that wasn't the only comment, because it's not easy what you think is going to happen once you cover and what the society thinks is going to happen when it's covered. It's two different statements.
I remember I'm still wearing a nice designer headscarf, but yes, absolutely, it was like
Yeah.
happened to her? She's so smart. She should know better. And
Yeah.
I really was surprised by the response.
Yeah.
But that's probably because people simply don't understand.
Yeah.
And then they realize that you're still the same person, but you have 64 square silk inches on your head.
But
But
what was there? Is there one incidence that you say, you know what? Oh my God, like I can't believe they said that to me, because I'm still the same Dalia, right? I'm still the same person I was before that decision, and I am the same person now, but look how the perception changed.
so so this is like fast forwarding many years. I I honestly can say I don't ever felt like I faced any outward discrimination.
Okay.
Honestly, I
Okay.
even
You're
though
lucky.
yes, and I'll tell you how I see it in retrospect. Even though I was born and raised in New Jersey, and my earliest memories are like of Iran hostage crisis, it was always those people over there, right?
Right.
It was so far removed from
Yeah.
me,
Yeah. You don't
and I
realize it.
always felt like I belonged. I always
Mhm.
felt like American. And in the run up to the not this past, but the 2016 election, when we started to hear a lot of anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant sentiment and anti-Semitic sentiment rise in the run up to the election, a few incidents happened in the summer of 2015 that made me realize that, wow, no, I'm seen differently. And it was almost as if, like, did I have a false consciousness that I belonged, and it smacked me in the face? And it happened the summer of 2015. I was, I live here in Central New Jersey, and the New Brunswick Food Bank runs out of food about like the second week of, this is way pre-pandemic, right?
Mhm.
About the second week of the month.
Mm.
And so knowing that my husband and I volunteer 1 month of the year to supply food to the food bank.
Oh, so sweet.
So it was the summertime, and I have two children. I took them to ShopRite, and what are the necessities of the food bank? Canned milk, canned fruit, peanut butter, macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese. Yep.
And so we've got 4 carts of this stuff, right? And of course the kids are embarrassed. And so people are like, what is this? No, we're buying food for the food bank. And people in the store were like, oh, so proud of you. Here's $2. Go get another box of macaroni and cheese. Like, this is civic participation. The kids are excited. And I have a very large SUV because I'm from New Jersey and we have to go to Costco. And so we have 4 carts, and I can't put them behind the SUV in the parking lot. So they're in the space next to us, and we're gonna load through the side doors because it's too much commotion to go into the lane. And then an elderly gentleman comes in a pickup truck, and he stands behind us, and he starts to rev his engine. And I turn around, and he starts to hurl at me things I've never heard before about me and my people and him and his country and people that look like me, but his vocabulary was words again I've never heard.
Yeah.
And he wanted to get into the parking space next to me where the carts were. So imagine I have the very large SUV, the doors are open,
Yes.
the carts are there, my son is next to me, and my daughter is inside, we're giving her stuff. And he keeps revving his engine. And I tell the kids, just don't look at him, don't make eye contact. It's a 600 space parking lot. He can
I know. Park somewhere else.
and he just keeps revving his engine. And then he proceeds to back his truck into the space,
Wow.
hitting the carts, hitting my car, and he pins me against my SUV.
Oh my God.
And he opens his door, and now we're face to face. And
Jeez.
I'm certain he's going to hit me. Like, I'm certain. And he just glares at me eye to eye and goes into the ShopRite.
My God.
And when he backed up, of course, my son jumped out of the way. He would have hit my son.
Wow.
And
I hope you got his license plate.
I'm shaking. Alka, I could not believe that this was happening. And, I'm a smart person. I can't even think straight. I can't even dial 911. Finally, I'm dialing, I'm shaking, and I don't even know what to tell the operator.
Yeah.
And so she's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm in ShopRite right here. And she's like, what's the license plate? And I'm like, well, I can walk right in front of the car. The car is right there.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling her the license plate, and I can't believe what's happening.
Wow.
And he comes, my daughter goes into the store and brings the manager out, young guy, and he doesn't even know what to do. And the man comes out. I'm still on the phone with the police. He peels out of the space again, hurling all this profanity, and he leaves. And now people are watching, and it's a crowd. And so another man in another pickup truck follows him, takes a picture. He comes back and he's like, I couldn't catch him, but here's his license plate. People were.
Wow.
And
so see,
so,
there's such a stark difference of someone who's not nice and someone who is taking a picture of this guy in a pickup truck and saying, hey, let's see.
And he kept saying, I'm here with you. He ended up, because I teach military and defense, he had military tattoos. And so like I kept telling my kids, look, this is someone who's here with us. And he said, I'm not going anywhere until the police come. And so finally the police come. I'm like, where have you been? They're like, actually, because of your description, we were chasing him. And they caught him. Alka, he lives 2 blocks away from me.
Oh my God.
And all I kept thinking is, there was such a visceral level of hate that he felt he could hit my car, possibly hit my son, and also pin me. And all I kept thinking was, I think I was 39 at the time when it happened, or 38. All I kept thinking is, wow, all these years, I never had someone tell me I don't belong.
Wow.
But then I looked at my children. And my son was, I think, 6. And I remember, wow, he experienced this at the age of 6. And I need for the rest of my life to convince him that he belongs.
Yeah.
That this is not the story. And so I grew up really with this false consciousness that just like everyone else.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm glad he got to see the polarity of the situation, right? He got to see someone who said, I'm here with you and I'm with you and I'm going to be with you until. So for him, that faith is restored that, okay, that was just an anomaly and that was not America, right? That's just somebody who hated it. And now that's so important for children to hear and see, because he needs to know that he belongs and this is America and this is him.
Yeah. So the reason why I say this story is because you were asking me professionally, have I ever been, other? So I was at, and this is actually on YouTube, I was at a major think tank, a political think tank in New York City on Park Avenue. And, I work on also terrorism and counterterrorism. And so the host asks me a question, all of us actually on the panel, and this is a very famous journalist. And he says, do any of you have children? And I'm the only one who has children. And so he says to me, he's like, do you ever worry that they're going to go on the internet and be radicalized?
What?
And the question took my breath away. And I said, wow, without realizing it, he just othered me in front of this massive Park Avenue audience.
Yes.
And the panel was on extremism and terrorism anyway. And so I said to him, I was like, let me tell you something. I know that we've been talking about how ideology and what are the responsibilities and what's happening, and a very complicated story or a complicated issue. But of everyone in this room, my brother worked at the World Trade Center. And when Al-Qaeda did their first terrorist attack in Iraq, my cousin who worked at the United Nations was stationed in Baghdad in that UN headquarters that was bombed. And she's one of the first people killed in that terrorist attack. And so I said, terrorism and extreme ideology has fundamentally affected my family.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually at the other end, right? You're saying, you're telling this audience that if anybody in this room, you should worry about their children, it's mine.
Yeah.
But of everybody in this room, I'm probably the one who's been most affected by extremist violence.
But you know what? Those comments like that, make you have to think about what response to give. And it's not a normal response. I remember going to high school and my teacher said to me, "So are you from India?" I was the only Indian in the whole school, right? So the only person. My first day when I went to high school, the principal said, "Don't do anything wrong, because if you do something wrong, somebody has to tell me is the girl with the long black hair, right? Because you're it." And the teacher says to me that, "Are you from India?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Do they let the cows walk all over the street?" And that's where, like, I said, "Really? Like, you're going to,"
Yeah.
and I said to him, I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "In front of 20 kids, this is your question to me. Now I have to sit here and defend myself because now all of these kids are going to be talking to me about this stuff." He said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And I was like, "That's just ridiculous. Like, we shouldn't have to defend that."
Well, so that the sentence you said to me that I should, about telling my kids that that's not America. So when he asked this question, and I was just like frozen, I was like, you know what? I have to tell you a story. And so I said, just like I'm supposed to sit here and tell you that that is not Islam, I need to tell my kids that that's not America. And
Yes.
each and every single one of you in this room knows that that's not America.
Yeah.
And you're dying for me to tell my kids that.
Yes.
But in the same vein, I'm sitting here telling you that that's not my religion.
Yeah.
And you're not buying it.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment that I had to, I'm very careful about not bringing personal stories in, that I had to make it personal.
Yeah.
And tell him, just as you said exactly, that that's not America. It's like, just as you want me, and you're dying for me to tell my kid that.
Yeah.
I have to turn this back on you and say, that is not my faith.
That's right. And but so that brings me to a point. So you're wearing a hijab, you're a political activist, you're a woman. Now you're a minority woman. You're amongst men mostly.
Mhm.
How are you given respect for what your knowledge is? Or your first basis is, "Oh, she's a woman.
Yeah.
She's a minority.
Yeah.
She must not know anything." So how do you bypass that?
So I'm always, especially in the beginning of my career, I was asked, is it tough to be a Muslim in foreign policy or in international relations? I was like, no, it's tough to be a woman.
Yeah.
Because it's still a very male-dominated field. But just like all immigrant parents tell their kids, you work twice as hard because you're an immigrant. You work twice as hard because you're a woman. And you work 3 times as hard because after I've taken care of you all these years, you're gonna have to take care of me.
Right.
I've always known that I have to work 3 times as hard as everybody in the room.
Yes.
And I really believe, honestly, that there's a level of merit in this country that if you do work hard, hard work is respected.
That's right.
And
You have to work really hard to get there. But
really,
once you are there, then you're there.
yes. And in many ways, like, I'm not going to undermine that, yes, comments get said, but I simply don't have time to listen to them. I've got way too much to do. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe people do say and do things that I don't see because I generally don't have time, but I do believe that there's a level of meritocracy in this society that people value hard work and pay hard work, right? It really does pay. And
Yes.
so just like my parents always told us that you're going to work 3 times as hard as everybody else, I do believe that in itself does pay off in the end.
Yeah. And so now when somebody makes a comment like that to you, but do you just ignore it and move forward, or do you reply? Because I almost feel that as an immigrant, if you don't reply, a lot of times it gives the other person a license to continue on, right? That we are seen as we're not going to reply back, right? So a lot of times you kind of have to give them a nice response, an assertive response, but something that says, "Stop. I'm just as much as an American. I pay taxes. You need to stop." Right? Do you end up doing that, or do you end up just ignoring?
Honestly, I and maybe it's just, where I live in my profession, I don't feel like I encounter a lot of comments.
Okay.
I also think that I'm very personable. So, like, for example, in my neighborhood, I'm a runner. And so I know a lot of my neighbors, right? And
Right.
so I'm just the crazy runner and, cares about
With
recycling.
lots of medals.
and cares about recycling. And, when we had the bad snowstorm like 3-4 weeks ago, shoveled my elderly neighbors. And I really believe that kind of civic association makes a lot of that go away.
Yeah.
And sure, I know when we first moved into this neighborhood, I mean, you were with us, right?
Yes.
Making the concerted effort to get to know our neighbors, right? And whether they wanted to know us or not,
Yeah.
eating some cookies and saying, hey, my name is Dalia, I'm your neighbor. Here's my card. If there's anything you ever need, and of course, 99% never reach out, but
Right.
there's always the 1% of like, hey, you gave me your number a while ago. My husband's not feeling well. I don't know what to do. I was like, don't worry, I got your groceries. And I think it's really that basic stuff that everyone is still hungry for. And
Yes.
if the pandemic has showed us anything, it's how much people are hungry for community and neighborly love.
And how much everybody wants to do, actually. And people are receptive, but you have to sometimes make them respect you.
Mm.
That's important. I think that level of respect needs to be, yes, it needs to be earned, but it needs to be commanded also. And I think for women and for minorities, it's important that you place, it's not going to be if it's not deserved, but if it's earned and if it's deserved, it should be expected and it should be deserved.
Right? if you look, for example, today at Congress, 36% are women of color.
Yes.
And the change happened actually very quickly when a group of women decided in the past 6-7 years that the political rhetoric was vile.
Yeah.
And that women had to stand up. I know you know this, but in the first Women's March, I actually was the keynote at the Women's March in New Jersey, looking like this, right? Like they asked me to speak on behalf of all of the women of New Jersey. This stuff means something, right?
That's right.
The level of meritocracy that respects understanding. And so I remember at the Women's March saying and reminding everyone that, the late Coretta Scott King, the wife of Dr. King, said that if the soul of a nation is going to be saved, it's going to be the women who will save it. We don't have the luxury of sitting this out. It's people who think have some like privileged luxury of not caring. No, that's a false narrative, right?
Yeah.
It is so incumbent upon us to not just be active, but to be visibly active because the stakes are so high. And so it's basic things like this, that our cultural values are so needed to redefine virtue in America today, because the virtue and the ideals of this country are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Virtues that our cultures possess would also allow us to enhance the quality of life of the elderly in New Jersey.
Yeah. So it's anything, right? You don't have to become the president of the United States. You can make a difference at the local level. You can make a difference in your community. You can do something to come out and stand up and say, you know what? But as minorities and as women, we have to work harder. You have to stand out more. You have to do more to be noticed. It's just how it is. We're not going to be noticed if we do the same thing. We're going to have to go above and beyond for someone to say the girl with the long black hair, in my case, is the one who did it, right? That's or the girl who wears a scarf or the girl who's visibly Muslim is the one who's doing this. That's just the rhetoric we need to have.
But in my eyes, the girl with the long blonde black hair is the girl on all the billboards all over Edison.
And in my eyes, the girl who's wearing a scarf is on everything that I see and is running and is doing everything. So done a lot, right? But we had to work hard and balance a lot.
Yeah. And it's not easy. I don't want anyone to think it's easy. I'm probably, exhausted and lost my mind a few times. And there's still an inherent value. Like I remember doing this interview one time and, as professional women, we're told to erase our families, right? Like I went to graduate school and women don't have children in graduate school, right? Nobody knew that I had children. Like I hid my pregnancies. Like I thought if anyone knew I was serious about this family stuff, I'd get dropped, right? And
Wow.
In my office, there's no pictures of my kids. There's no cartoon, nothing, right? I'm a professional. And it's kind of how we're as women, we're told, put your emotions at home, and of course, men are held to different standards. Men who have to leave early to pick up their kids from school are hero dads. If I do that, right, it's like, oh,
you're not taking yourself seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're caught up in that world. And, so I was being interviewed and someone's like, what's your, best accomplishment? Like which book, which this, which that? And I was like, are you kidding? My greatest accomplishment, and they're not from me, they're a gift from God, are my children.
Oh.
And we're not taught to value that, right? Because they don't go on my resume, right?
Yeah.
There's no value added to my CV.
Yeah.
And so for women who are like, okay, well, Alka, you're a professional, you're a successful businesswoman. Dalia, you're a professor, you've got a wall full of degrees in front of you. I'm just a mom. No. Every mother, every woman has such value. Like when we're told women carry half the sky, all of this stuff, you can't undervalue who you are as a woman, who you are as a daughter, who you are as a carrier of heritage, whether you
Absolutely.
have it or not. And that becomes incumbent on the aspect of community service.
Absolutely.
And so I never want women to undercut who they are. Every single woman in her own capacity is full of potential. There's ever been a time where women are needed to step up to the plate. You might not run for office, but you might actually create the greatest healing at this moment of extreme pain by thinking outside of the walls of our homes and really moving on into thinking as a village.
That's right. And with that, I'm going to say, thank you, Dalia. Your words of wisdom have been priceless. And if one woman can make a change, if one person can make a change, that's the goal for both of us. We've achieved what we want to do because we both want to give you motivation. Just do it. Do something, make a change. Thank you, Dalia. Thank you for coming on Soul Talks with Alka. It was a pleasure. Thank you.